That is important because following this contraction, the IMF is saying to us that there is light at the end of the tunnel, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reason why they are telling us that they are forecasting growth of 3.4% for the year 2021. Growth of 8.1% 2022. And of course, in 2023, 2024, and 2025, they are seeing an average growth of 5%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this kind of economic forecast, this is the kind of economic forecast you would expect from a country with a working government. This is the kind of economic forecast that you will expect from a government that is managing the economy of the country well. Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of forecast you would expect from a country where the government will remain in power. Mr. Speaker, the government must remain in power. If we have to change in a time like now, can you imagine what is going to happen to this sweet country of ours, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we know that most of this growth will be led by agriculture. Agriculture is important, Mr. Speaker. And among the many sectors that had difficulties, or that improved rather, is the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, the agriculture sector grew by some 2.1%. And we have to continue to invest in agriculture because that is one of the areas where we're going to see those growth. Also, manufacturing, Mr. Speaker. We will also see some growth in manufacturing. And that is the reason why we have to continue to invest in manufacturing, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I must say that the outlook is encouraging because of the measures government instituted early during the pandemic. You will well remember we had rebates to companies equivalent to 8% reduction in corporate income tax. We had income tax reduction from 25 to 17% to companies which signed agreement to continue employing at least 80% of the workforce. We had tax incentives, Mr. Speaker, for the importation of inputs and raw material. We had a loan at Aid Bank, where people were able to access, business owners were able to access loans at 1%. And we had a number of taxi drivers, taxi operators, bus drivers who took advantage of those loans at the Aid Bank, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've made significant investment in health, over $22 million, Mr. Speaker, to contain the widespread COVID infection. Mr. Speaker, 3.1 million was provided to cushion the social impact of the pandemic under the Public Assistance Cash Transfer Grant, to which over 3,000 people benefited, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we provided income support to heads of families. And all this we did, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that at this point, we can say, yes, we are seeing growth on the horizon, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this didn't come by chance. We took deliberate action to stabilize the economy. And so, even at this point, we can boast and we can talk about our effective management of the COVID pandemic, to the extent where we do not have not one single death, Mr. Speaker, and that is commendable. Not one death, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the IMF can tell us that we should not let our hearts be troubled, because behind every dark cloud there is a silver lining, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we look at our fiscal position, I must say that we've done very well, Mr. Speaker. Our fiscal position has improved. We're talking about the reduction in deficit. Our deficit from 163.2 million in 2019-2020 to less than 100, Mr. Speaker, million for the fiscal year 2020-2021. And that is important. In the middle of a pandemic, we are able to reduce our deficit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about expenditures. We have reduced on expenditures. But the important thing to note, Mr. Speaker, is that we have not cut salaries at all. Salaries continue. Everybody get paid, and sometimes paid before time, Mr. Speaker. All our safety net programs remain intact. So the people, Mr. Speaker, were not affected, even if we had a reduction in expenditure, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, tax revenue dropped. Tax revenue dropped by 36.2 million. But at the same time, overall revenue increased by 37.8 million. And, Mr. Speaker, this speaks to the importance of the CBI and the importance of grant funding, Mr. Speaker. So, overall, we have done well in the management of our funds, Mr. Speaker. And this budget is a very, very generous budget. Every measure enunciated here, Mr. Speaker, is a measure that will put money in people's pocket. And no tax, no additional tax. And that is important, Mr. Speaker. So, there is so much that we can talk about this budget. There's no need to have all this circus activity going on in the House. I wish I had 2.5 hours to present, Mr. Speaker, because there's so much to talk about. And to get an opportunity to talk, and then you leave and trying to create confusion. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. Very, 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 very unfortunate. Mr. Speaker, the Roosevelt-led administration is a working government. It is a caring government. It is a government that will rise to the occasion no matter how challenging it may be. Because it is a government by the people, a government of the people, and a government for the people of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, this is not a sleeping government. I saw a lot of pictures circulating on the internet, Mr. Speaker, where people in the House falling asleep. Nobody on this side is falling asleep, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine? You have to have you're in a meeting with the IMF, or you're in a meeting with the World Bank, and they're taking your picture falling asleep, Mr. Speaker? What does that say for Dominica? What does that say for... Are these the kind of leaders that are supposed or want to assume government, Mr. Speaker? We have to be serious in this House. Mr. Speaker, I want to briefly discuss two major pillars of our macro policy that will continue to energize the economy as we continue to build resilience. I want to talk, Mr. Speaker, about the CBI, the Citizenship by Investment Program. Mr. Speaker, from my perspective in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Planning, I have seen firsthand the central role this program continue to play across all sectors in Dominica. I believe, Mr. Speaker, every Dominican should be proud of the work that this government has done to build and manage the CBI program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I took note yesterday, of the reaction of two opposition senators. Every time the Prime Minister mentioned the word CBI in his presentation. And the reaction, Mr. Speaker, was a kind of paranoia, a kind of mistrust, distrust kind of reaction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't understand why people are afraid of CBI. Why do they get so concerned when we talk about the CBI program, Mr. Speaker? All over the world, there are countries running CBI program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, according to Global Citizenship Citizen Solution, in Germany, do you know you can get citizenship for 360,000 euros? Yes, in Greece, 250,000. The UK have a fund investment where you can pay as much as $2 million, £2 million, Mr. Speaker. Vanuatu, you can get your passport in 1 month for $130 US, Mr. Speaker. Even the great America, Mr. Speaker, has the EB5 approved investment from 900,000, Mr. Speaker. So why can't we have our own program here in Dominica, Mr. Speaker? Especially when every citizenship website, every ranking agency declares Dominica as #1, Mr. Speaker, in the management of the CBI program. Mr. Speaker, that is the reason why when we get an opportunity to go out there, we have to sell the CBI program. When we get a chance to go on 60 minutes or 20 minutes or wherever minute, sell the CBI, Mr. Speaker. When you get a chance to go on the Indian media, you have to sell the CBI. When you come to this house, you want to talk about where the money gone, sell the CBI, Mr. Speaker. We have to sell the CBI. The CBI is a lifeline and a major revenue stream. So let us protect it and protect it at all times. Mr. Speaker, just imagine 58% or $253.3 million of our capital budget will be funded with proceeds of the CBI, Mr. Speaker. Over 50% will be funded with proceeds from the CBI. And very importantly, Mr. Speaker, of that 253.3 million, 75 million, Mr. Speaker, will go towards the Dominica International Airport, Mr. Speaker. And members of this honorable house, fellow citizens, whether you like it or not, I firmly believe that the airport is a done deal. And Honorable Douglas told us it took us 60 years. 60 years to get to this point. But we will reach anyway. And Mr. Speaker, no letter to the American can stop us now. No commercial bank in Trinidad can stop us from funding it now. This is not an election gimmick. This is no pie in the sky, Mr. Speaker. This is a done deal. The people of Dominica want it, and so shall it be. And nothing, Mr. Speaker, nothing stopping us now. Are we go get them? Are we go get them, Mr. Speaker? You can understand that, Mr. Speaker? Do I have to interpret that?
You have to, yes, you have to interpret it.
We are going to get it, Mr. Speaker. Pupagado, I will go get them.
You have to interpret Pupagado.
Thank you, Jesus. We are going to get it, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a lot of movement, Mr. Speaker, as we get towards the construction and development of the international airport. You have seen over 30 houses being built in the Joe Burton area. A new housing development, Mr. Speaker, looking very good. We have made over 150 acres of land available for farmers so that they can boost production. We have signed an agreement, Mr. Speaker, a very, very important step, signing an agreement. We have appointed a CEO and a board to oversee construction. Quite a bit is happening. Of course, we have constructed a testing lab so that we can ensure quality assurance. We have a land use plan being developed. Of course, we are encouraging the people in the area to register all their heavy equipment. So much is happening as we pursue our international airport. So, Mr. Speaker, this airport is going to be built with our own money. And that is important. The same CBI that we are talking about. The same instrument or the same financial instrument that we use to build houses in Bellevue, build houses in Georgetown, to build houses in La Plaine and Grand Forks. The same instrument, Mr. Speaker, we will use it. The same instrument that we use to build health centers all over 12 health centers, Mr. Speaker, all over the country, we will use that instrument. The same instrument that we use to fix up Roseau. Make sure Roseau looking good and nice, and people want to come to, everybody wants to come to Roseau now, Mr. Speaker. Basketball rolling in the night. We have, don't talk about the promenade. People, you can get your barbecue pork, you can get everything. Any hour in the night. Action, Mr. Speaker. The same instrument is still available. And Mr. Speaker, we will use that very same instrument to build our airport. And it will not cost taxpayers $1. And it will not be a burden, a debt burden, Mr. Speaker, for future generation. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we have to do all in our powers to support and protect the CBI program. Mr. Speaker, we also, one of the other economic drivers is a strong PSIP, Public Sector Investment Program. This financial year, Mr. Speaker, we have in our capital expenditure total of $438.9 million for capital expenditure. This will consist of $253.3 million for local funds, 64.8 million loan, and 120.8 million coming from grant. Mr. Speaker, this is very important because this is the sector that will drive economic growth. When we talk about employment creation, when we talk about opportunities, infrastructure development, we're talking about the PSIP, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I took note that 33 or 32 million is allocated to the Ministry of Health. Experts at the IMF, Mr. Speaker, are telling us that if we are to escape the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, healthcare spending should remain a priority. According to the IMF, the fastest way, and I quote, the fastest way to improve economic outcome is to suppress the pandemic. Our investment in healthcare is absolutely necessary if we are to successfully manage the pandemic and achieve the growth to which I alluded earlier. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of National Security, and all the frontline workers who continue to keep us safe, I really want to commend them in a very special way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, government investment in housing also shouldn't go unnoticed. As such, we have allocated over $57 million, the Ministry of Housing, And we will build in excess of over 700 new homes, Mr. Speaker, because housing is important to this government. Everywhere you go in the region, people are telling you this is a housing government. And history will record this government as the government who has done the best in housing ever in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over 13 million is allocated to the Ministry of Education. Education, Mr. Speaker, is very important. And every time I hear the word education, I always remember this infamous composition from the Mighty Sparrow. And Mr. Speaker, I know we're not allowed to sing in the house. But when I hear this song, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education.
Not too long, member.
Not too long. But to be recognized anywhere you go, you should have your certificate to show, to enjoy any kind of happiness. Knowledge is the key to success. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's the first time we must have seen a calypso in the house. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying all this to say that this calypso is even more relevant now than it was yesterday. And I must say that even myself, I want to really thank the government of Dominica for the opportunities created that people like me can come and stand in this house and make a presentation because of the investment this government has placed in education, Mr. Speaker. And I want to encourage the youth. I want to encourage the youth to take their education seriously, Mr. Speaker. Embrace the opportunities. So, the opportunities, of course, that are created by this government to educate yourself. Education, Mr. Speaker, I mean, I know so many so many people that have come out of poverty because of an ounce of education. So I really want to encourage the young people out there to take their education seriously. And that's the reason why this government is laying the foundations, putting resources in place to make that possible, Mr. Speaker. And yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that 200, Mr. Speaker, wherever in the Caribbean or in the world are you hearing those kind of figures in the midst of a pandemic? 223 new positions for teachers, Mr. Speaker, in secondary school. Something that I expect to hear a big applause for from the other side, Mr. Speaker. But they're not there. They're not there, Mr. Speaker. 223 new positions, costing the government an additional $1.3 million, Mr. Speaker, annually. That is important. And of course, I would expect that the teachers, I myself being a former teacher, that would certainly motivate me, knowing that there is room for upward mobility in the system, Mr. Speaker. I think that is very, very important. Apart from the investment in the human resource, Mr. Speaker, we also investing in a number of schools, new schools, the construction of a number of schools, the Mao School, Grand Bay, the Will Strathmore Stevens in Marigot on the construction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over $2.5 million going towards the Dominica State College, the Dominica Grammar School, the Goodwill. This exciting times, Mr. Speaker, for education in this country. All this and more because the government believes in the education of our nation, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in this new environment, decisiveness, accountability, timely implementation of strategic priority initiatives are indispensable. This public sector investment program will foster economic growth, create employment, and ensure the safety and development of our people. Mr. Speaker, I want to take a little time to talk about the what? The PAL rep is absent, but I will deal with that later. Mr. Speaker, I want to take a little time to talk about the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Planning, Mr. Speaker. I want to, at this juncture, express my sincere commendation to the entire staff of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Planning for the tremendous work done for the period under review. It's just unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that the only reward for hard work is more work. But trust me, we will ensure, and I saw the PS somewhere around, that we'll have adequate work-life balance. So we will work and work and work and don't even realize we are working, Mr. Speaker. But I really want to commend them. The Fiscal Planning Division. Mr. Speaker, the ministry of which I serve is the custodian of resilient agenda. Moreover, Fiscal Planning Division has successfully been engaging partners in an effort to promote more responsible, resilient, and client-driven solution to the physical development of the country. Mr. Speaker, success in our effort is manifested consequently in the increased number of individuals and entities seeking guidance and approval of planning division. In fiscal year 2020-2021, the division received 361 applications for planning approval, and that is compared to 305 received the previous year, an increase of 15%, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, preliminary data also indicates that the division is on par to receive the highest number of applications in the year 2021 than any other year for the past 5 years, Mr. Speaker. And this speaks to some of the policies. When we talk about the grant for first-time owner the transfer fees and so on, everything, Mr. Speaker, coming into play, and it is manifested here by the number of people who are seeking approval, who are seeking planning approval, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, things are looking good. And of course, this is an indicator, it's a very, very positive indicator. It's an indicator that Dominicans have confidence in the policies of this administration, and they are ready, Mr. Speaker, to get on board to drive economic growth in the construction sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Fiscal Planning Division has also been engaged in preparing a new Northeast Area Development Plan. This will designate land use in the Wesley Woodfortill area that are compatible with the development of the international airport. And all this has been done in sync, Mr. Speaker. Everybody working together to see the success of this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk briefly on the Green Climate Fund. Yesterday, the Honorable Prime Minister made mention of the Green Climate Fund. Of course, the intensification and frequency of annual hurricanes demand the need for adequate preparation for climate resilience. And in this regard,
23
Mr.
more
Speaker,
minutes, 23 minutes.
23 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of time. Thank you very much. Just to say, Mr. Speaker, that there are a number of projects that we are going to be undertaking under the Green Climate Fund, Mr. Speaker. We talk about the Green Climate Fund Readiness Project. We talk about the National Low Carbon Transportation, Mr. Speaker. A Green Industrial Eco Park Feasibility Analysis. And also, of course, Mr. Speaker, a National Financing Vehicle for Low Carbon and Climate Resilient Investment. And all those programs, Mr. Speaker, will set us on a path to take advantage of a lot of money that is out there, Mr. Speaker, in excess of over $1 billion. Mr. Speaker, I want to quickly mention the rehabilitation of the Fiscal Planning Office. Since after Marigot, Mr. Speaker, we have seen the destruction of the office. This time around, Mr. Speaker, we're going to ensure that we put the office back to use and we can improve what is there at Goodwill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to also quickly touch on our technical assistance centers. The technical assistance centers are centers that are all over the country. We have about 4 of them, Mr. Speaker, that will basically decentralize the activities of the planning division. So we'll have our development control officers, we'll have engineers, employing somewhere about 22 persons in the first instance, Mr. Speaker. And that will be able to provide a lot of relief for persons who are seeking advice and guidance as it relates to planning concerns. Mr. Speaker, my general brother earlier on advised that I should talk a little about Marigot. And I wish I had the privilege to talk for about 2 hours or 2.5 hours for Marigot. But all I need to say, Mr. Speaker, that the record will show that no other government in the history of Dominica has invested more in the Marigot people than the Dominica Labour Party government. None, Mr. Speaker, not Freedom, not United Workers Party, none have invested more. And I can say that boldly, and because I was born there, I bred there, and all my life has been in the Marigot constituency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a special love for Marigot. Marigot and Concord. Very, very, very special love. I think all that I've received in life is as a result of my upbringing in Marigot, Mr. Speaker. And this relationship has strengthened when I became a full-fledged member of the Dominica Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I feel obliged to share some of our achievement under the Dominica Labour Party. And I wish my parliamentary representative was here. I would have given him the script so he could read it for you, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, Marigot is evolving as an economic powerhouse under the Dominica Labour Party. People all over are in search of land to come to Marigot. They want to come to Marigot. Marigot is like a magnet now, Mr. Speaker, pulling people, especially with the development of our international airport, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Marigot constituency is a significant segment in the broader integrated development plan of the Northeast. And we talk about a number of people receiving jobs, enhanced food security, protection of livelihood. Just talk about it. Marigot is the place to be, Mr. Speaker. As soon as I finish here, I'm running on down there. Fresh breeze, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Marigot, you will see a 40,000 square feet, $50 million new Marigot hospital, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, now that it is completed or 90% complete, you hear everybody want to claim it. If they didn't say that, it wouldn't have been built. You remember the story of the little red hen, Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Who will help me sow the seed, Mr. Speaker? Not I, said the fox. Not I. Who will help me to make the bread? Not I. But who will help me eat the bread, Mr. Speaker? I will, said the fox. I will. But Mr. Speaker, it belongs to all of us. It belongs to all of us. The Marigot Hospital will provide quality care for clients of the Northeastern District. I had the opportunity to visit on several occasions, Mr. Speaker, and I can say that I am very pleased that I was instrumental in helping a number of young people gain employment during the construction phase of the project. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that of the 90 people who have been regular in terms of their employment schedule, Mr. Speaker, 68 of those people were Dominicans, Mr. Speaker. Very important. And the Marigot Hospital will have children ward, male ward, female ward, 2-room operating theater, intensive care unit, dental unit, dialysis room, accident and emergency, radiology, laboratory, pharmacy, kitchen, laundry, auditorium, and it even has an oxygen room, Mr. Speaker, where we can supply oxygen not only for the Marigot area, but even Roseau, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what we have in Marigot. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I need to also say that this hospital was built with proceeds from the CBI program, Mr. Speaker, and that is important. That is important. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the Marigot Hospital, I can speak of a number. I can speak, of course, of the Marigot Health Center. There's not many communities in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, that can talk about a health center and a hospital being built at the same time, Mr. Speaker. And that happened in the Marigot constituency. Over $3 million, Mr. Speaker, for that particular facility. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about housing, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if I should go to housing, but maybe before I go to housing, I should talk about the Will Strathmore Stevens School, education again. Over $2.2 million being invested currently, Mr. Speaker, for the renovation of the Will Strathmore Stevens School, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the police station looking good. We have sub-treasury, we have police office, dormitories, we have all kind of things in the police station now. Policemen are more comfortable. Mr. Speaker, over $745,000 being spent there. And I think that is important. The Dominica should know that. Mr. Speaker, I am seeing now brand new houses being built at Melvin Hall. Brand new climate resilient houses, Mr. Speaker. I'm not talking about those steel frame things we had in the sea long time ago that has never, not even the foundation was able to come up, Mr. Speaker. I'm talking about brand new houses, Mr. Speaker. 3-bedroom houses with kitchen, dining room, washroom, veranda, Mr. Speaker, at a cost of over $2.1 million, Mr. Speaker. Houses where people can go and relax and feel comfortable. That is what the Labour Party is bringing to the Marigot constituency, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, our investment in housing did not stop there. Over $69,000 in doors and windows and cement to help to improve people housing condition. 180,000 sent to the village council last week, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have proper toilet facilities, and we have about 10 people going to benefit from that, all contracts signed already, Mr. Speaker. And that is happening in Marigot. And I'm not talking about, Mr. Speaker, all the other social protections that we are benefiting from. The Yes We Care program, over 41 client, 90 caregiver, Mr. Speaker. I really have to take my time here. When it comes to Marigot, I'm really excited, Mr. Speaker. Really, really excited. Mr. Speaker, the public assistance program benefits 94 individuals in Marigot. This amount to a respectable monthly commitment, annual commitment that is, of $246,000, Mr. Speaker. Talk about education, the school transfer grant, Over 17,000, Mr. Speaker. Somewhere about 25 students benefiting, 35 students benefiting. The textbook program, over 150 students benefited, Mr. Speaker, at $36,000. Mr. Speaker, talk about laptops. Laptops, Mr. Speaker. We have never seen a government come and bring laptops in Marigot. Over 60 students benefit from the laptop program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, school transportation. Nobody, I remember growing up as a little boy, my grandmother had to do all kind of work to get $20 to pay the school, the transportation fee to go to school. Right now, we do not have that problem in Marigot, Mr. Speaker. Every child is free transportation to go to school, Mr. Speaker. We talk about the NEP. Over $40,000 being spent in the constituency every month under the NEP program. So, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier on, I really do not have the luxury of time to tell you all that is going on in Marigot. But when somebody will come and tell you that nothing is going on in Marigot, you have to tell them, no, go and talk to Caressa.
That's right.
Go and talk to Caressa.
Right.
Because Caressa is the one on the ground. Caressa is the one who knows what the people are going through in Marigot. And that's the reason why they have to come to talk to the Caressa. So, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude.
11 more minutes.
Mr. Speaker, if you had told me about that, I would tell you more, but I'll conclude. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I really want to express or extend my gratitude to the Honorable Prime Minister and my esteemed cabinet colleague for the collective leadership, and to all who lend support and encouragement to me, Mr. Speaker, as a parliamentarian. Is it a parliamentarian?
Yes.
Or as a senator, Mr. Speaker? Because there is something in Marigot, I am not a parliamentarian. I'm a parliamentarian. Of course I'm a parliamentarian. I just want to put it on the record, Mr. Speaker. I'm a member of parliament.
Yes, you are.
All right. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank my colleague for the encouragement and the wisdom that they have shared and helping me to groom me, Mr. Speaker, as a parliamentarian. Mr. Speaker, I also want to express sincere thanks to the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Planning, my PS, Mrs. Joseph, and all the staff who really work extremely hard, especially working to put the capital estimates together. I think they did an excellent job.
Yeah.
And also those who were involved in developing or putting together the EASR, the Economic and Social Review, Mr. Speaker. I think they did an excellent job. I mean, this document can go anywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker. I think they did a wonderful job. Mr. Speaker, I also want to reiterate that global and regional economic outlook are still underpinned by significant uncertainties and downward risk. I will sound the call that we all have to continue to remain vigilant. Remember that we are not out of the woods. We still have to be concerned of what is happening in the region, what is happening in the world, because whatever is happening out there will impact what is happening here. So we have to be concerned. Mr. Speaker, I think this is the budget for the people. I think this is an exciting budget. I think this has something for everybody, Mr. Speaker, especially the fact that we are going to undertake one of our biggest transformative project, which is the international airport. I believe every Dominican, whether it be government side or opposition side, I think should support, rally and support the international airport. Mr. Speaker, to achieve our goals requires a united front. To achieve our goals requires a united front. Irrespective of your background, irrespective of your race, your political orientation, we should all work together to develop this beautiful country of ours. Dominica will continue to take flight, Mr. Speaker, and we will climb higher and higher, Mr. Speaker, with God on our side and Dr. Roosevelt's carrot as the leader, and Labour remains in power, Mr. Speaker. Dominica will continue to rise higher and higher and higher. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be suspended until 3 p.m.
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended until 3 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The House stands suspended until 3 p.m.
Mr. Speaker.